Let's talk about oil. It is and should be the most servicing on your car. It, among other things, has three very important jobs. The first being lubrication. There's lots of metal on metal going on in an engine. You've got timing chains going around, you've got pistons going up and down, which have got bearings in the bottom of them, on the crankshaft, all sorts. So having a good lubrication system is vital for an engine to work. Without the oil, I'm sure you've seen the videos online, you're talking probably 2-3 minutes at best, and then engine dead. The second being the encapsulation of the byproducts of combustion, which sounds really confusing, but in other words, the byproducts of combustion are carbon and some other bits and bobs. They float around in an engine, they need to go somewhere. So the oil holds them until it's time to change your oil. That's the whole reason we have oil change intervals, because the oil gets saturated with those bits and then needs removing. Hence why the oil goes black in an engine. That's the after of combustion that otherwise would just destroy an engine. And the third, which takes a more important role in kind of performance engines, but you know, it is in standard engines as well, is cooling. You'll have piston squirters in some engines, you'll have oil coolers, oil being better at moving heat than coolant, which sounds a bit kind of counterintuitive, but yes, cooling as well. There is many other reasons as to why we have oil, but those kind of the three main important ones that we need to think about. There is a lot going on in this bottle, but I'm going to break this down into 3, maybe 4 very simple pieces of information. Let's talk about the numbers on the front. What do they mean? So there's 2 numbers on here. This is a multi-weight oil. We need to make sure that those 2 numbers match what is in the service book or online in service data for our car. But what do they actually mean? The first number is the winter weight, the viscosity when the oil is cold. The second number is the viscosity at operating temperature. But viscosity is measured in some weird scale. So 30 is actually thicker than 5, but oil gets thinner when it gets hotter, which is a little confusing. But basically, as long as we match this to what we need, we're golden. Why do we have multigrade oils? Well, the smaller number is measured, as I said, when cold. Why is that important? So when an engine starts and is cold, you need to get that oil around as quickly as possible to get the oil pressure up and the friction down. So that reduces wear and also for emissions purposes, lets the engine warm up to temperature as quickly as possible with as little damage as possible. In a, win-win in both situations. Then the second number is our operating weight. This is 30. You might find on some high performance engines or some engines that have a high amount of wear, so like high mileage heroes, you may need to go up on that number to maybe 40 because the tolerances have all opened up, in a worn engine, things get a little bit baggy and they need a little bit more help. In short, for our purposes, we need to make sure that matches. The second useful piece of information is this wording here. Fully synthetic this is. You will also find mineral oil and semi-synthetic. We need to also make sure that matches. In modern cars, we use fully synthetic oil because it's compatible with the rubbers and the seals that we have in engines. In older engines, we use a thing called mineral oil, which is pulled from the same thing that diesel is, petrol is, grease is. It's a naturally occurring substance, but it's a lot more friendly to some of the older seal types that you find in engines, like rope seals and cork gaskets. But basically, another thing we need to make sure matches is the fully synthetic. Basically, modern stuff is fully synthetic. Some things in the 90s and 80s were kind of semi, and then earlier stuff was mineral. The next really useful piece of information is usually on the back, occasionally on the front, but this is basically what additives the oil has and what they're compatible with. Some really swanky engines need some really funky additives, but some don't. So there's no point buying super expensive oil for your Ford Fiesta that was made for a Ferrari if there's no need. So you always match these to what you need. Again, looking in service data or in your user manual. For example, on my BMW need BMW LL, standing for long life, which this has. It also has some Volkswagen ones, Mercedes ones, but yeah, basically you can see a theme here. We need to make sure that matches the specification. Other than those 3 things we've just spoke about, there's not really any other information we need off this bottle. Basically, in short, as long as those 3 things we've just spoke about match what you need and what came out, you're winning. The other thing we change when changing our oil is the filter. It does exactly that. It filters out the contaminants from the oil and holds them. It kind of helps the oil last a bit longer because it doesn't have to hold all the contaminants. This kind of does the job for it and keeps them all in one place that we can remove and then switch out with a new one. You'll find 2 different oil filter types generally on engines. This, which is a filter element, so that lives inside a container or or a holder or a housing or whatever you want to call it. And also you'll see the spin-on type. They look like tin cans with a thread on the top, and the whole thing is disposable. There's different ways to change them, but generally they do the same job. The other part of general engine maintenance is an air filter. It does exactly that. It filters the air going into your engine. Engines like nice, clean, filtered air, so they don't get damaged, and all those bits and bobs get stuck in cylinders, on valves, all of that rubbish. So yeah, keep this as clean, we're happy. What you're going to need for your engine service, starting with getting the oil out, we're going to need a socket to undo the sump plug, and then somewhere to put the oil. I've also got a selection of copper washers to replace the sealing washer on the drain plug when we take it out. We also need a socket to get the oil filter out, and then I've got brake cleaner for cleaning up any oily stains. Obviously you need some blue roll, towel, whatever you prefer to use. Then we move on to the new stuff to replace the stuff we've just removed. So, brand new oil and filter, both the spec that we need, and an air filter. First step, jack up the car. Make sure you've got axle stands on both sides. Once you've got it on axle stands, make sure you do a safety jiggle, just to make sure those axle stands aren't going anywhere, because we're going underneath. Now, once we're under the car, this bit will differ slightly, but the theory is the same. The sump plug, which is where the oil comes out of, is on the bottom. So B&W conveniently put it under this little like protective cover thing, so you don't have to take the whole under tray off. Some cars you have to take the whole under tray off. So yeah, there's a little fixing, and then we turn it, that pops out, and then under there is our sump plug. We take, I think it's 17 in this case, pop it on. They shouldn't be horrendously tight, and then crack it off. And you haven't got much room. It's interesting to say the least. Like that. And then once it's cracked off, place your bucket underneath, let me line you up, and then you want to swiftly remove the plug without dropping it in the oil container or chucking oil down your arm. Which, if you're new to this, 3, 2, 1, go. And while that's doing, we can leave it to it. So we're going to pop out here, and then we move up to the top. Now, on this B&W engine, the filter is on the right side, so we can remove the rubber thing off the top. Plastic, not rubber. And then we've got here, I just went and found it, 27mm to get this off. It's like a little plastic thing that is over the top, and we just undo that like we did the sump plug. Now, do this gently so it drains back into the sump whilst that sump plug's open. Get yourself a cloth ready, because it's going to make a mess. Then we wind this out, maybe a little bit more. There we go. And then it should just come out with the lid and the filter. Oh, the lid came off separately, it doesn't matter. Filter's in the gap. Give it a wiggle, make sure it comes out. There we go. And we chuck it on the cloth. I'm just going to add this bit in here. This is a can cartridge type filter, opposed to the filter element type that was on the B&W. So this is kind of all inclusive of like the holder and the filter. There's a seal between the oil filter housing and the oil filter, which is the thing we need to make sure is sealing properly. So yeah, again, don't over tighten these like the ones in the filter type, but also to get them off, there's many tools. I personally prefer using something like this, as long as you can get round it and unscrew it. Generally they should only be hand tight, but they get stuck over time. So there's many tools, there's strap wrenches, there's like chain wrenches, there's all sorts. But yeah, it literally just unscrews, nothing special. Whilst the oil is draining outside, bring these back inside, or wherever you please. You want to replace this little copper sealing washer. Kind of stops all leaks, which is a bonus. You can get these kits from Amazon, AliExpress. Generally when you buy these oil filters from B&W, they come with them, but I simply misplaced the spare one. So yeah, find a washer that fits, like that. So that solves that problem. Clean it off, don't be a heathen. And then filter will look like this. So we simply remove the middle bit, which we did earlier, chuck it everywhere. Put that in the bin. Clean, clean, clean. Sometimes you'll find on the filter types they have a middle section as well, with generally that bit would be on the middle of here. So that has replaceable O-rings, but with B&W ones, well, these ones in particular, that rubber O-ring comes with the filter. So the only one that we need to change is the one that's here. It's on the lid. So as I said before, when you buy the filter, generally they come with them, but I've also misplaced that little packet. But yes, replace that with the one that comes with it. And you can do that with a pick, a screwdriver. I don't know where it is, but there is a specific tool for doing so, which I can never find, he says as he managed to find it, which is this little fella. It's like a little paddle. So yeah, pop the seal off, and then we replace it with a new one, and make sure we lubricate it and chuck oil everywhere else. Before you replace everything, give it a nice clean. Now cleaned all the goop out of there, still left it on there, take your new filter and it just clips in like that. One thing to note when we put this back in, that little peg needs to go in the hole on the car. If you don't, you'll either have no filtering or no oil pressure. So yeah, make sure that goes in the right place. Also, one thing to note, you probably want to replace these from time to time because over time the heads get worn and they strip the threads. Generally with modern cars you won't strip this, you'll strip the sump. So you need to be really careful because this is steel and the sump's alloy, which is very soft. So we always make sure we don't over tighten these because that puts you into a world of pain. Once you've got that back in the hole, it's just a case of tightening it back up. Generally for your convenience, they will tell you the torque figure on the top. So this one's 25 newton meters, which is not very tight. But generally with these, you nip them down until they stop, no more. Yeah, when it's tight, literally just nip it up. That's all it needs. It doesn't need to be crazy. Run your finger around the edge, make sure you haven't pinched the seal, because then it will leak. And then get some brake cleaner, clean the area off, put the cover back on. I'm not going to film putting the sump plug back in because it's a tight squeeze down there, but thread it in, don't cross thread it, and then torque it to the spec that you'll find in the use manual, hopefully online. Just remember that steel into alley, you don't want to over tighten it. You then want to responsibly dispose of your oil. For us in the UK, you can take it to the local tip and they'll recycle it for you. Don't chuck it down the drain. We're on to the home stretch. Now we just need to put some oil back in again. The oil cap's generally on the top of the engine somewhere. It had a little oil symbol on it so you know where to put it. A funnel makes this a hell of a lot easier, but if you haven't got one, don't stress. Get a 2 litre Coke bottle or whatever fizzy drink you drink, top off, makes your funnel. If you're a good pourer, you don't even need a funnel, but I'm a terrible pourer, so funnel in hole. And then this engine takes, I think it's about 6.4, so we'll chuck in 5.5, check it, and then we'll just keep topping it up until we reach the right level. Right, that's about 5.5-ish litres. Pull your dipstick out if you've got one. You can probably just see it. We're just up to the bottom mark there. So that means it's safe to start the engine. It's not the full amount of oil, but it's enough that it's not going to kill it. We want to start the engine for like 10, 15 seconds, maybe 30 seconds, just to fill the oil filter, get oil flowing. Once you let the engine run for about 30 seconds, knock it off and just leave it because the oil needs to drain to the sump before we get a proper reading on the dipstick. Take this time to tidy up any bits you've got lying around. Another thing I can do while I'm waiting, obviously this is going to be different for every single car, but we can pop out the air filter, which conveniently on these is 2 clips, and then that's it, out it slides. And then obviously this is why we replace air filters, this one's pretty minging. Chuck your nice new fresh one in the hole. Simple as that. Now some time has passed. Hopefully all the oil is in the bottom of the engine, in the sump, which is where the dipstick reads it from. So, pop it out, clean off whatever residual bits and bobs are on there. Chuck it back in again. Have a little look-see. We're just up to the first mark. So generally on dipsticks, I'll show you, just wipe that up so we can nice and clean. There's 2 marks, hopefully that'll focus. Generally between the first mark and the second mark is about 1 litre. I mean, this changes from manufacturer to manufacturer, but from what I've experienced, that is 1 litre. So if it's right at the bottom, you need an extra litre. Obviously, if it's halfway, you need half a litre. Simple as that. It's then just a case of putting oil in the top, checking it at the bottom. Keep doing that until it's at the right level. Simple as that. When you're done, put the cap back on, put the engine cover back on, or whatever you might have. Give it a little clean, you know, make it presentable. Shut the bonnet, job's a good one. Now that's all done, I'm going to kind of conclude and summarise some best practices that I probably didn't go over while doing it. I know one thing that will come up is pre-lubing, pre-filling oil filters. The oil filter is in line with the oil system. So that initial startup, if it's empty, you're going to have a very brief time where there's no oil in that oil tract, which can be bad for oil pressure, bearings, all sorts. With modern oils, generally they hang around better than older oils ever did, so the risk is minimalised because all that oil is still coating the metal that it's on. But yeah, best practice is, I didn't do it, but with a kind of can type oil filter is fill it up before you screw it on. Obviously on some cars they're mounted upside down, so you can't do that. With the filter type, the one we've just done on the BMW, you could refill that, but I think on those it drains back into the sump anyway, so it's kind of pointless. But that is something to bear in mind. You will see people do that, pre-filling oil filters. Then the other thing you want to do is try and reduce leaks. We all know BMWs leak, we all know cars leak oil, but if we can do our best to prevent that, you know, happy days. Even if that means, you know, getting yourself a cheap packet of copper washers to make sure the sump plug doesn't leak, checking that rubber ring around the top of the oil filter sits is intact and not damaged. One thing I didn't tell you as well with the can type oil filters, they have a rubber seal. Generally what you want to do is just screw those on, but when you do it, make sure you lubricate them with a bit of engine oil, doesn't matter if it's new or old, and don't over tighten them. Obviously if it's leaking, nip it a bit further, but it's better to, I find generally with cars, nip things, if you're unsure, loose, and then you can always tighten them and stop a leak. If you've gone too far and stripped the threads, you know, you can't recover from that. One last thing I'll say as well, you want to make jobs like this as easy as possible. There are tools for everything, as I mentioned in the tool video. I personally use these really cheap, I think are they floor mat? I don't know where they come from. They're like £1. Just something to lie on. It's the middle of winter, it's freezing cold. You need to be comfortable as well while doing this, because there's nothing worse than having a bad back, being cold. You know, it gets annoying. We want to enjoy this. The whole reason we're doing this is because we enjoy cars, so let's make this as easy as possible. As I said, make sure you've got a good bucket. If you haven't, take something like an oil jug, and if you cut a square in it, set it on its side, you've got something to put your oil in. You know, you don't need fancy tools. I just have the luxury of having said tools. But yeah, I'm going to wrap this up now. If you want to put in the comments videos that you want to see, things you're not sure how to do, you know, I'm starting simple. All change is the simplest thing we can possibly do. But hopefully from here we can move on and do some more complicated things. And until next time, goodbye.